going, Ethan. Keep going.
Wave again. There you go.
So let your tires turn a little bit so the traction control can work, right? Let it spin a little bit. No brake or anything, just full throttle. Pass the drive. There you go. All right.
He'll move.
All right, what's up, Facebook, YouTube world? Mike here with Morrison's Outdoor Adventures. So little change, we're doing our Off-Road Essentials live stream on Monday night rather than Wednesday night. So thank you guys for joining us. And we actually have a pretty special live stream tonight. Most of you, I'm sure, have been watching Facebook and seeing the recovery that recently happened. And it was out west with a Bronco, and the kinetic rope went through the windshield. So fortunately tonight we have the opportunity, we have brought Caleb on to talk about his experience. So he was the one in the Bronco. He was the one that was hit by the kinetic rope. So we want to kind of give him an opportunity to kind of share his experience, talk a little bit about that, and hopefully pass on some knowledge. Not really anything where we're going to try to, pick apart the recovery, because again, we weren't there, so we don't know what happened. So we're going to just, again, let him kind of explain all his experiences. So I'm going to bring him on here. Hello, Caleb.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. So Caleb was involved in a kinetic recovery, and this was in California, right?
Yeah, up in Northern California.
Yeah. So, I'm sure a lot of you have seen all this stuff kind of floating around on Facebook, every kind of internet sensation overnight, right?
Yeah.
But we want to kind of give Caleb an opportunity to talk a little bit about what happened, so that again we can learn from mistakes. So, to start off, Caleb, tell us a little bit about kind of your background in the off-road world.
So I grew up overseas in a third world country. I lived in Honduras since I was 12 to 18. And all my time there, I spent learning to drive on an old 79 Land Cruiser on washed out dirt roads. Everything there is essentially off-roading where we lived. I mean, we worked a lot in villages that didn't have power. No one really went out there. So it was just like, that's how I learned to drive in that kind of setting. And
Wow.
then coming back to the stateside, I've been off-roading since 2018, 2019 with my Jeep. And then I got the new Bronco. And then I also have a 58 cab over that I'm building currently. And I've been working been wheeling on the Rubicon for 5 years, multiple times a year. I lead the local Bronco group up in Northern California. And I also work as a trail guide on the Rubicon and just wheel all over the country almost every week.
Wow, that's awesome. So I can only imagine, growing up overseas and learning to drive on like a right-hand drive Land Cruiser or one of those, third world country Land Cruisers as diesel, and on their roads, that had to be just a wild experience.
Oh, it was a blast. Yeah, the old Suzu's there too. Like all this good stuff you can't get in the States. It's all down there. It's all rust buckets, but it's really cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So your latest rig, it sounds to me you kind of come from a Jeepers background a little bit, but your latest rig's kind of found you in a Bronco now.
Yeah, I got the Bronco for a daily, and I told my wife I wouldn't mod it for at least a year, and I held true to that word. But after the year was up, I started going crazy. My Jeep is my cheap build, and the Bronco is where I spend a little bit more money, just because I want to for fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's cool to have a little bit of variety too.
Yeah.
So you had a recovery, right? A kinetic recovery, and it went wrong. So you had a kinetic come through the windshield of your Bronco. Tell us a little bit, kind of just about that experience and kind of what happened just through your eyes.
It was horrible. I can look back now, and I have a pretty dark sense of humor a lot of times, so I can look back at stuff, horrible things, and find the funny parts. But it wasn't fun. Do you want me to like run you kind of through from start to beginning? Okay.
Yeah.
So long story short, I'll try to make this shorter than the 50-minute video I put up. I got stuck in the snow, just having fun. People go up and they get stuck in the snow all the time. It's part of the experience. It's fun. So I got stuck in the snow, and my group was up ahead of me. They were turning around to come and get me. I said, no, it's okay. The guys we passed earlier in the Jeeps, they're coming up behind me. Let them hook up real quick. I'll be on in a few seconds. Jeeper guy came up, super cool dude, hooked up to my rear bumper, gave me 2 pulls backwards, but both of our vehicles were just sliding further over to the snow. So now we have about 10, 15 feet of track in front of me. And he's like, well, let me try on the front end, see if I can pull you up in your tracks back out onto the road on the pack stuff. And I was like, sure. He went up to the front. I hooked up my kinetic from my bumper to his bumper. He gave me a pull, and it was a hard pull. And I remember being like, crap, that's a little harder than I normally do. And he wound up for the second pull. I'm looking at my driver's side, and I'm seeing my driver tire sticking out onto the packed snow. And I'm like, I'm almost out. One more pull, real quick. We'll be fine. It's okay. It's a kinetic. In my mind at the time, I'm like, it's designed to be yanked on, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so he runs up. I remember he does a really hard run up. I hear it like winding up, the motor winding up. The tires gave a little spin, then they caught, and we went. And I just remember a tremendous jolt followed by a snap, like a really loud snap, then a crash, and then intense pain. And then all in the span of like a second, this happened. Then like a warm, sticky feeling, and looking down and seeing blood dripping all over my center console, my pants, my seat, and then putting my hand up to the side of my neck. And when I brought it back away, it was just covered in blood down my sleeve. And I was like, I'm dying. For a split second, I was convinced I was going to bleed out in just a few seconds.
So
then,
when the kinetic ropes came loose, right, and came back through the windshield, like you felt that and you heard that snap.
Yeah,
it was pretty loud.
It's hard to explain. It was very intense. It was like a loud crack, like a whip, followed by glass being tossed in your face at 100 miles an hour, whatever speed that thing was going.
Oh my gosh, wow.
That's the part I didn't talk about in my video too. I had hundreds of pieces of glass embedded all over my face and chest and arm.
Yeah, I can imagine with that amount of force. I mean, it probably had to just absolutely obliterate your windshield.
It just punched a hole straight through it.
Wow. Gosh. And so then you physically felt the kinetic rope hit you.
Yeah.
Wow. And so whereabouts was it in your neck or was it in your shoulder?
So the main thick loop of the kinetic on the end, that hit me square in the shoulder right here where my hand is. And it left a really deep black mark bruise. And then when it hit the shoulder part of that loop, that hit me in the chin. And when I say chin, I'm not talking like it's like upper neck, lower chin, like right here. That hit me here with some of the glass. And then as it shot past me, that whole length of the rope was rubbing at whatever speed it was going on the crease of my neck and shoulder.
Wow.
So it was a gash, maybe about that big, and it was in like a Y shape. So there was another line coming out from it, and it was right here underneath my beard, and it was split wide open. And I had a picture. The picture didn't come out super well, but it was split wide open. And then I had 2nd-degree burns right here, and my neck swelled up quite a bit right away. And like the crease of my neck right here just quadrupled in size. It was like a fold. And so it looked like a gash. And the blood was coming down the blood splattered, and then it was dripping really fast, but it was coming down underneath the chin and dripping from here where that crease was, which made it appear like a gash. And it was bleeding from the gash because you couldn't see up here because of the beard. You could only see the blood coming from right here.
Wow.
And all the pain was focused right here too. I didn't feel this. I didn't feel this at the time.
Yeah. So you just basically felt the rope burn on the side of your neck.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of force to hit you and then continue past you and burn, leave that kind of rope burn on your neck. Wow, that's a lot. So anytime stuff goes wrong, right? It's always a series of bad decisions or incorrect. I don't like to say bad decisions. I like to say incorrect decisions, right? Because sometimes when we're doing stuff, we have to kind of weigh pros and cons, and recovery is inherently dangerous. I mean, it's just the way it is. But kind of walk us through, kind of the failure points of your recovery. You were kind of there that day, and I watched your video, but it wasn't just one piece of kit that broke, right?
No, there was a lot of failures. And I mean, I start off the bat, like I'm assuming all the responsibility. I'm not trying to place blame on any one source or any one person other than myself. Like that was my recovery. I messed up. A couple of different things failed as far as what actually failed, not forgetting everything else, just talking about the failure points. The Bronco side of the bumper, the clevis, where I had the tow rope, the kinetic rope mounted to. I had it mounted to a D-ring onto a clevis on my Bronco bumper. And the pole that second pole ended up pulling the clevis about 2 to 3, I haven't measured exactly, but 2 to 3 inches out. And when it pulled it out of the bumper, it sheared the metal tab holding that clevis in place. It bent my frame horn where the bumper was mounted to out, allowing the whole bumper to shift kind of at an angle out from the Bronco. And then it ripped the 2 massive bolts going through the clevis into the frame out of their threads and pulled that clevis into the outer shell of the bumper, which then folded that out by about 1/2 inch.
Wow.
Roughly. And then after all that happened, the soft shackle on the Jeep side, which was incorrectly mounted through just the clevis itself, that snapped at the loop.
So it didn't break at the clevis. It actually broke at the loop side.
Correct.
Where it goes around the knot.
It's a matter of contention. I'm not 100% saying what it is because I am not an expert at dissecting rope damage after the fact. But if you look at the pictures I that are everywhere right now, I actually have the moment where the shackle snapped captured on film, and you can zoom in, and I showed some pictures in the video that are circulating. It's a still picture. And the loop where on the soft shackle, it's the knot, it's the rope, and then it's the loop that goes around the knot.
Oh, it looks like we may have lost him. Let's give it just a second, ladies and gentlemen, see if we can get him back. Looks like it just logged him off. So send him a message real fast, ladies and gentlemen, and see if we can get him to log back on. But for those of you just joining us, we've got or had Caleb on here from the recent recovery with the Bronco, where the kinetic rope came through the windshield. So he was sharing his experience and talking a little bit about that. So hopefully we can get it back on here to kind of finish that out. But some of the things he was just kind of going over was talking a little bit about the failure points of the recovery and where things kind of went wrong. He was talking a little bit about how he was hooked up, it looked like on the driver's side of the Bronco, and it actually pulled the clevis and the mount off the driver's side. But it caught and didn't get a chance to rip out. It actually broke on the Jeep side on a soft shackle. So it looks like we got Caleb coming back on here. Oh, we're upside down.
Upside down. How's that?
There we go. Yep. Can you hear me loud and clear now?
It's a little muffled, but I can hear you. My phone overheated.
Oh no. Oh geez.
I had to take the case off of it.
All right. Well, so you were kind of talking about the soft shackle failing on that side, and a little bit about that aspect of it. So let you jump right back in and tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the shackle failed at the loop, which went around the knot. And when you look at the still picture, you can see the soft shackle still through the kinetic rope loop as it's getting yanked back right at the same second it broke. And the knot is sitting there suspended in the air, and the loop is no longer around it. It's gone. And so my assumption is, based on that photo with how it's showing it, the loop snapped from around the knot. And then if you look at the rope itself after the fact, it's in my garage still. If you look at the rope itself, that soft shackle, it's the loop that's broken. The whole rope goes all the way up to the loop, and then that's where the failure is. So my assumption is that it's the loop that failed. There was a sleeve that was on the soft shackle that was through the clevis. That doesn't make it any more safe. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm just trying to say is that sleeve was through the clevis, and the sleeve is not damaged. So in my mind, that's showing that the failure did not happen in the clevis itself. Even though that's a bad spot to put it, it put extra stress on it. It's not where I recommend hooking up a soft shackle whatsoever. Based on those images, I believe it failed at the loop, which is also, from what I'm told, the most common point of failure on a soft shackle.
Yeah. A lot of times they do fail right at the loops. It's kind of the wear point for soft shackles, and from in the world of recovery gear, it's more evident now than ever. Is cheaper gear, a lot of times that's their failure point, right? It's just not. Sometimes it's inferior gear, sometimes it's inferior kind of workmanship on it, but a lot of your cheaper ones, the loops will be the first failure point on them after just a little bit of use. So with it actually sounds like with the soft shackle failing, it saved a little bit, because that metal, if that had come out of the bumper, that would have been a pretty heavy flying projectile, right?
Yeah, for sure. It would have been a whole nother story. So the soft shackle failing for that scenario, with how everything was placed, was the best case, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the kinetic rope itself didn't fail at all?
No.
Wow. Now, what size kinetic rope were you using?
A 1 inch by 30 foot.
And I remember kind of listening in your video, you said that when you were getting pulled the first time and the second time, that it just didn't feel like it really absorbed any shock load. And from the video watching it, it didn't look like it had a whole lot of stretch to it.
No, it appeared to be acting like a toe strap pretty much at that point.
Wow. So I know, like, size wise, you're supposed to pick kind of a specific size for your vehicle. And one of the most common things, like I teach in my class, is that bigger isn't always better, right? With kinetic stuff, because then our smaller vehicles can't get the stretch out of it. I almost would wonder if a smaller kinetic rope or a smaller tow kinetic strap would have given you more stretch and less kind of shock load out of that.
Yeah, and that's something I've learned since the event. Actually, it's crazy what you can find going online and going through what type of kinetic rope to choose. Um, since the incident, I've gone through all the forums. I've gone just done basic Google searches, gone to websites, and the information is all over the place. So to find something like a one source that you can trust for good information is hard because you don't know who to trust, and there's so much different info out there. Like the comments on my video, the forums online, you can find some really, really bad information that people swear by. Like multiple people are saying in the comments, like bigger is always better. Uh, you're looking for like the braking strength, the minimum braking strength being as high as possible. So of course 1 inch is better. Why would you say 7/8 is better? That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Uh, well, 7/8 can stretch more with the right vehicle application. There's like some crazy science behind it. And I was talking a lot with Justin from Factory 55, who laid it all out for me. Same with Mad Matt 4-wheel drive. And I learned a lot talking to those guys.
Yeah, yeah. It's the concept behind that is, like for instance, so my Land Cruiser, I carry a 7/8 because if I carry anything bigger, it's just going to become a tow strap. And I don't know. One thing I don't know that I would like to know more about is whether or not cold weather really affects the kinetic stretch of straps or ropes.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's uh that's a
That'd be
question for one of those guys. I know time, like sun, can affect it. Like the longer it's in sun, it gets degraded. If it's
yeah,
exposed to moisture and not dried out properly, that can degrade it. Um,
yeah.
I'm not sure about cold weather.
Yeah, that'll be a question I'll have to reach out to Justin about. But now, so do you feel like that kind of the breakage of the gear and stuff was unavoidable, or would there have been an opportunity for that gear not to break? It's again, it's hard. One of the things we do as trainers is when we look at a recovery, we kind of figure out, the recovery, we call it a recovery resistance of the stuck vehicle, but not being there, we don't know that, and nobody really would just looking at a picture, right? So was this just something where the truck was just so stuck that it was going to take that amount of force to get out, or was the failure from just over acceleration, or was it just bad gear? Those are
It,
all kind
it
of
was
questions that you
it was a
you
chain
want to ask
reaction.
yourself.
It was a series of unfortunate decisions. Um,
Yeah,
the hindsight 2020, looking back, the what I didn't know at the time was that my passenger side, after that first forward pull, had buried into a snowbank up to the bumper. Well, looking at the driver's side from my car, I could see the packed snow pretty much up to my tire. So I was thinking, I'm still in the tracks. I'm almost pulled out, good to go. But when I look at the drone footage, and then I didn't have access to the drone footage at the time. I was not the one flying the drone. Like it wasn't something I was aware of. Looking at the drone footage, I see how much I was buried. And if I had taken the time to get out and look, I would have seen, okay, I'm not in the tracks anymore. I'm past the tracks and I am now buried really deep. And I either need to go backwards or I need to dig out. Um, a couple questions were brought up about winching. Winching, it might have worked. It would have been worth a shot. But there wasn't much traction. Like the I'm assuming the guy in the Jeep was getting a running start because he was having difficulty with traction initially, which is why he was getting up to speed to have the traction, so to speak. I think if that little Jeep was trying to pull my Bronco buried in the snow with a winch, he would have just been pulling himself backwards. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. We didn't try it.
Yeah, it didn't look like there was many anchor points out there either.
No, people were mentioning, oh, look at all those anchor points pointing to all the saplings. This place
Yeah.
was hit by a big fire about 2 years ago. All those are 2-year-old burnt saplings that are about the width of an arm, maybe. They would not have worked.
Yeah, and a lot of times like saplings and stuff like that, because they're so young and tender, when it's cold weather, they just tend to snap. They'll shear right off, even down close to the ground, versus, you know, being a nice kind of supple pull where they'll kind of sway a little bit as you're pulling against them. When they're cold, they just like to break. So
And they were
I
all
don't know what,
long dead.
yeah, wow. So now, so the speed definitely, it sounds like, played a factor, you know, and not necessarily the speed of the vehicle, but just the speed at which the recovery was being performed. One of the things we talk a lot about is stuck assessment, getting out and observing and seeing what's going on, how you're stuck, and that type of thing. Do you feel like you would have done things differently if you had kind of in between pulls gotten out and checked outside the vehicle and seen what's going on? Would you have probably re-changed how the rigging or things like that were happening?
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to point out as well is I'm by no means an expert. That's not what I'm claiming. I'm not trying to point that out there. Um, but I've been doing this a while, and so one of the points I was trying to make in my video is how it's important not to become complacent or get out of your
Yeah,
normal routine. I have a normal routine. I'm not normally the kind of guy that's rushing these things. I'll dig out. I'll take other options, less violent options. Um, I'll assess. I'll think methodically about, okay, like just earlier that day, we had a Bronco that was practically on its side in a snowbank. And you can see that in the video I posted right before the recovery video. There was a Bronco that was on its side in the snowbank that we ended up having to do we had to use anchors, 2 winches, a tension line, snatch blocks, double line pull. Like we dug out first. We used all the tricks in the book to get this Bronco out of the snowbank from where it was on its side. And we were able to do that successfully with minimal damage other than what it was caused when it initially went on its side. There was a new driver that didn't know that there was a big ditch and he just drove in the ditch. He wasn't being crazy or reckless. He just didn't see the ditch because all the snow was flat. So he's driving and all of a sudden his passenger end just sank. Um, so like that's normally how I do things, methodical,
yeah,
planning it out. And then in this instance, I was just rushed. I was rushing and it was all on me. Like there was no need to rush. I would have been fine. I'm not going to lose anyone. My buddies are waiting for me. They're within sight. Um, but yeah, that's normally what I preach is slow it down. And I did not
yeah,
exercise my own preaching.
yeah. Now, so I think this next part is probably the most important because, you know, again, take you've got some experience off road, you've got some experience with recoveries, and bad stuff still happens, right? Eventually, for most of us, if we spend enough time doing anything, whether it's off roading or anything outdoors in general, an injury is going to happen. But one of the biggest things that I kind of took away after watching your video was your guys' actions after the injury happened and going through that process. Like you really laid it out, you know, talking about in your video about you felt like, you know, hey, I'm gonna die. This is it for me. But then, you know, as that adrenaline came down, you really kind of evened out. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. First off, my thoughts if I was gonna die at the time, that was not drama effect. That was real. It was an intense, scary moment, and something that I still think about, just how intense that was. And I'm used to intense events. I've experienced near-death encounters multiple times, doing really silly stuff. So that was intense. But one of the takeaways was realizing that the setup we had was actually used. Like, you always hear, bring a med kit, bring your fire extinguisher, bring all this stuff on the trail. But a lot of times it's not talked about placement and communication for that.
Yeah.
My first aid kit was placed in a highly visible spot in my Bronco. It is a complete kit. I am very aware of what's inside of it. And then my friend that was with me was very aware of what's inside of it and where it was. And the idea being, anyone can go to my Bronco, my Jeep, wherever. They can look in any of my windows, any of my doors, and they can see that first aid kit. They know exactly where it is. And it's got the rip off Velcro. So you just run, grab the kit, and rip it off. It comes right off, and it's ready to go. But not only is it important to know where it is, and like, you can have all the cool fancy gear, but if you don't know how to use it, you're kind of useless.
Yeah.
Struggling to read one of those pamphlets in the kit on how to properly apply a tourniquet while you're gushing blood, your adrenaline is through the roof. A lot of people don't realize the adrenaline dump that can be associated, and no one knows how they're going to react until the time comes. You can be like the most alpha type gung ho guy, and you could freak out like a kid. Like, you don't know. And I've seen firsthand in these situations through my job how people can react, and you don't know how you're going to react. You can talk as much talk as you want to talk, but you don't know until it happens. So to have that training and knowledge ahead of time when your motor skills are gone and you have an adrenaline dump going on is crucial for providing good care. And yeah, it's kind of funny looking back. The cut was here, right, and not here on the neck. But I don't blame my buddy for not knowing that. I don't blame the EMT that was there, the retired guy, for not knowing that. They looked, they checked, and in the moment when it looks like it's gushing blood from the neck, the idea is to put pressure hard and hold it there, not to take it aside, wipe all the blood away, and continue checking. Okay, well, we think it's there, but what if there's another cut? Like, no, at that time, that's your priority. So I don't blame them for misjudging where the cut was. They had what they could see at the time, they acted on what they saw, and at the end of the day, I'm alive.
That's right. And you hit the nail on the head right there when you said that, having the med kit where it's accessible for anybody, right? One of the things I do when my wife and we guide trail rides is in the opening discussion, I say, hey, this is where this med kit is, and this is what this med kit can do. Make sure you know where it's at in my vehicle. And I make sure everybody knows that. Same thing with fire extinguishers, right? Because the last thing I want to do is have somebody get hurt. They slip and fall and they get a cut on their head or anything where they're bleeding profusely, and then somebody's having to look for that med kit and spend time looking for it. They're throwing stuff out of the way, and even if it takes them 2 minutes to find it, the damage is there and it's done.
If you cut a major artery, you have 12 seconds, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, that's not much time. Or a tourniquet, you cut some big vessel or whatever it might be, you're bleeding profusely out of a limb, you have a couple minutes maybe. So getting that stuff on and fast is key to living, and that's
Yeah.
not something that should be just tossed in the back under a bunch of gear for someone to struggle to find for about 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Even, so even like my kids, they know where to find stuff in our med kit. Even the simple stuff like low blood sugar tablets or anything like that. The gauze or medical tape or anything. I make sure that they know, and we unpack it consistently and we repack it again. And I think that's important. I actually have a comment here from Megan. She said she changed where she keeps her first aid kit based on your suggestion on one of your Instagram stories. So, I think it's so important, the medical side of things, because people don't think about it. You're right that there's such an adrenaline rush that happens even with small injuries, and you lose your decision-making capability, you lose your fine motor skills, and all of a sudden you're just floundering around, or somebody's watching, or you're hoping that somebody's going to be able to help you and they're floundering around.
Yeah, I can't see the comments. Can I see? Maybe I can read the comments too. Oh, I can. Look at that.
Yeah. So now the communication aspect of it, you touched on that a little bit, being able to call. So you guys didn't have cell phone service where you were at, I'm assuming.
No.
So you guys had to basically call out ham radio emergency channels to get the airlift and everything to come in. So you guys were prepared to do that as well.
Yeah. So I'm not a radio expert. I love tinkering with radios. It's cool to me. Communication has always been key for me on the trails. Where I live, we have an extensive repeater network for ham and GMRS radios. A repeater network, for those who don't know, it takes your basic walkie-talkie simple signal, just really dumbing this down for myself and for anyone else who doesn't understand it like I don't. It takes the signal from your radio. It'll go to a tower, and then it's like a cell phone tower. It amplifies it and sends it miles farther. So we have an extensive repeater network in our area. If you're connected to those repeaters, if you have signal, you can get a message out from where I live to, sorry, where I was wheeling, all the way to my house if I wanted, like 80, 100 miles away, and it would make it. And I was connected to two different repeaters in my Bronco. I had my handheld ham radio connected to the local ham repeater, and then I had my GMRS, which is hard mounted, which is connected to the local GMRS repeater. And so I know all the people that are listening to those repeaters, or a lot of them in my area, and there's guys that are constantly monitoring those repeaters that know who to call to get a hold of the local authorities and helicopter, all that stuff. I live near the Rubicon, so we have a ton of guys using those systems constantly. So it's not hard to get a hold of someone. A lot of times though, people don't have access, they don't have that luxury. And in that kind of situation, iPhone 14 and up with their built-in satellite thing will work in a pinch. A Garmin InReach device, all that kind of stuff is essential to have that emergency communication when you don't have cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's just another thing that people don't think about. If you drove somewhere, it took you an hour to drive off road somewhere, it's probably going to take you 3 hours to walk out. And if you don't have cell phone service, you don't have cell phone service.
You're just kind of stuck and you're in a bad spot. Like if that was me and it was just me and the guy in the Jeep and we didn't have a radio, he'd have to drive me out. And I estimated later it was maybe a 2.5 hour drive to the hospital if we were booking it.
Wow.
So
yeah, and then
that's
you're
the
just,
trauma center.
and then you're hoping that adrenaline's not going to take over and the driver of the Jeep's not going to have an accident. It just opens up all kinds of avenues for more issues, right?
Yeah.
Well, so all in all, though, let's say from kind of start to getting picked up by the helicopter from the second you got hit with the kinetic rope, what was that kind of timeline? How much time was in that?
Estimating, I could probably figure it out by looking at the timestamp of the photos I got sent, because there was a lot of us that ended up being there on scene. And I remember someone asking me, like, because he had nothing to do. I was already being taken care of by a bunch of knowledgeable people. He had nothing to do. He was like, "Do you want me to film this?" And I was like, "Sure." I'm like sitting there like this with the gauze. I'm like, "Sure."
Yeah.
So that's how I got all the footage. But the time estimated was from when I got hit to 30 to 45 minutes, maybe.
Wow. I mean,
And that was delayed as well because they had to get some sort of special ski mounted onto the helicopter for the snow.
yeah, I'm, that sounds like, a really short amount of time considering where you're at. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's 45 minutes that you had to make do until they got there,
Yeah,
and a lot
and
can happen in
eventually too,
45
like
minutes.
we realized after a couple of minutes that, okay, I don't know what I cut in my neck. We still think my neck is gashed, but at that point we're like, I'm still here, so I'm not bleeding out. We've got the bleeding under control. So we're a lot more calmer at that point. I'm breathing is actually really good. Breathing in the nose, out the mouth. Just keep repeating that very slowly, calmly. Keep the heart rate down to bleed less, and then you don't go into shock, all that good stuff. But like at
Yeah.
that point, I wasn't really talking much. I'm just focused on breathing, and the time flew by really quick. But yeah, I can't imagine like if I was actually critical, how that would have been. But
Yeah. So, you know, I'm sure that this experience has changed your outlook to a certain extent on off-roading. Have you been back out on the trails since then?
no, only because the body shop can't get my Bronco in till the 20th, and I can't drive it because the windshield's shattered out, and because of insurance, they don't want to just do the windshield right now. It's weird. So
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that, and then my Jeep is in my garage currently. I'm taking the axle all apart, trying to fix it because it doesn't drive well. So I'm in a borrowed car right now. I can't go wheeling. Drive me nuts because we just had the best snowstorm and I missed it.
Oh my gosh. Well, Caleb, thank you so much for sharing everything with us. And for those of you still kind of joining us here, I'm going to throw up Caleb's socials here for his YouTube channel. I'm going to give you a barcode up in the corner that you can take a look at. But if you want to check out his YouTube video, kind of talking about the accident, it's at popo_patty. And you can check that out. Go subscribe to him. Watch the video. It's well worth it. I definitely, even I took nuggets away from it. And I think anybody would, right? As far as someone that's kind of lived through that experience and he's willing to share that. I think stuff like this happens a lot more, but people don't share, right? They're not willing to kind of share what really went on. So make sure that you check him out on YouTube and check that video out. But Caleb, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. The goal with this is just to help prevent this from happening to someone else.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And at the end of the day, we thank God that you made it home to your family safe and sound, and you're still willing to get back out there and do it. So that's awesome to hear that as well.
I might be wearing a face shield from now on, but
Yeah, get a ballistic vest to carry out there.
yeah.
Well, again, Caleb, thank you so much. Everybody that's joined us on this live stream, thank you guys so much. And check us out next week, guys. Hopefully we'll have another Off-Road Essentials with Morrison's Outdoor Adventures. But let's give Caleb a round of applause, and thank you so much, Caleb.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. We'll see you around.